A year and a half ago, I made a video going over every single mod on my GLI. Since then, a lot has changed, and honestly, the build is entirely different. I know a lot of you guys have been asking for an updated build list and parts list of this car, and I've just been waiting because I keep adding one more mod, and then I'm like, oh, I'll make it after this mod, and then I add one more, and we keep going down that cycle, so today, we are just gonna go ahead and do it. This is every single part on my GLI. Now, I'm gonna break this video up into segments so that way you guys can actually just kind of go through and see which mods you guys want to know about. But I think before we get any further into actually diving into everything, let's just kind of go over why I built the car the way it is. This car started as a brand new GLI with 6 miles on it. Technically, this is my second car, but it's the first car that I have ever bought myself and the first car that I've ever modified on my own and really delved into the world of modifying cars. I didn't really know what I was doing at first. I've just kind of been learning along the way, and it is basically a really nice, fast street car that is also a great daily and can still get 40 miles per gallon. The car has been on many road trips, many daily drives, and a couple of track days. And I plan on tracking it a lot more in the near future, but we'll get into that soon. So I guess let's start with the simple stuff, the tuning. This car is custom tuned through EQT and it is on 93 octane. The car has an EQT Vortex standard turbo and is running right about 35 PSI in 4th gear and about 33 PSI in 3rd gear. Now this is a hybrid turbo, which basically means that the exhaust housing is the same as the factory IS-20 turbo that comes on the car. However, the compressor side, which is the side where the intake goes into, is larger, and also the compressor and the turbine on the turbo are larger than the factory turbo. And that allows it to basically just mate up perfectly without any additional modification. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the car is running a peak boost of 35 PSI. And in order to do that, we have to upgrade 2 different sensors on the car. And then there's also a 5-bar EQT put sensor, which is sitting on either the discharge pipe or the charge pipe. I can't 100% remember. But those are important because the stock sensors on the car are only good for 30 PSI. And if you want to run more than that, you have to upgrade those sensors that can read higher boost pressure. Look, if I butcher something, I'm not an expert. This is just kind of what I have learned working on the car, so take it all with a grain of salt. Now, I chose the EQT Vortex Standard because I was pretty much between that one or the Vortex XL, but in my case, I would have rather preferred the quicker spool time opposed to the top end, horsepower gains. And honestly, in my case, I'm totally happy with it. It pulls really, really hard and shoots pretty much full boost all the way to red line. Now, here's the thing. You can't just throw a turbo on it, throw some sensors on it, and expect it to make power. There are a lot of supporting mods that I have done to this car that help it make the power it does. For now, let's kind of go into what is allowing to make this turbo flow so well. Now, the first thing you'll probably notice if you ever look into my engine bay is that you will see this gigantic air intake. This is the Blaze Atom V2 carbon intake. Now, whether you got this intake or another one, really the goal of a good quality intake is to be able to A, reduce spool time, reduce wastegate duty cycle, and of course, make cool noises and move as much air as possible. Now, just to kind of go over it real quick, this is an air dam that pulls in the air. It gets sucked into the filter right here. This is a filter housing, so that way it doesn't get too hot on the filter itself. We have this giant silicon intake hose right here, and then it goes directly into a really wide and shallow turbo inlet down here. And then after that, the air ends up going through this little arm down here that might be kind of hard to see, but you can probably see it a little bit. And it goes into our EQT Discharge Pipe Kit. Now, this pipe right here is the discharge pipe, and this is responsible for moving air out of the turbo into the intercooler. And those are upgraded because they're wider in diameter, which allows more air to be able to move through the silicon pipes and that discharge pipe itself. Now, I am using an ARM Motorsports turbo muffler because I got this kit secondhand, and my buddy basically used the EQT one for his ARM kit, and I basically just took his ARM one for my EQT kit, if that makes sense. So if you ever hear me say that I have an ARM turbo muffler, that is true, but I have a EQT Discharge Pipe Kit with the ARM turbo muffler. But they work fine together, so I guess that's good to know. So we have an upgraded intake, we have an upgraded discharge pipe kit, but the biggest thing of all on these cars that is super duper important, and I wish I had done way sooner, was getting a nice intercooler upgrade. Now, the discharge pipes and the intercooler are pretty much completely hidden, so it's hard to show, but we do have a Do88 direct replacement intercooler, which is one of the best flowing intercoolers for this platform. That intercooler replaces the stock intercooler versus something like a front mount intercooler, which goes in front of the stock intercooler. It is a beefy boy. But it's really important because when we're pushing more heat in the car and more power, we need to be able to cool the car and not let it heat soak. I will say, when I had this car on just a simple stage 2 tune, it heat soaked so fast because I didn't have an intercooler that after I did like 2 or 3 pulls, the car was pretty much like making 60% of its power. It felt really sluggish, and it just did not do well without an intercooler. Now, we just covered all of the mods that basically are on the intake side of the turbo. So now let's kind of just talk about the exhaust side of the turbo and how we're getting all of that air through the car and out of the car. So first things first, we just actually installed this gigantic ARM Motorsports 4.5-inch Catless downpipe. Now, downpipes are super duper important because the more air you're putting into the car, the more air you need to be able to push out of the car. And previously we had the CTS catted downpipe, which was good, but the reason we ended up going to a larger catless downpipe is A, because of the sound, but B, it also helps push more air out of the turbo faster. Now, I'm not a scientist, I don't know a ton about cars, to be honest with you, but we did take some data logs with this new setup, and we did find that it spooled about 600 RPM quicker to 27 PSI, which is a really nice improvement, and honestly, it's something that you can really feel with this downpipe versus something like what I had before. The downpipe is 4.5 inches at the top, but it still tapers down to 3 inches at the bottom, which is like, that's good and that's standard. But we also have an upgraded exhaust because in a lot of cases, the stock catback can actually become pretty restricting at certain power levels. And so what we have is the MBRP catback, which you can see right here. Now, this exhaust has been modified so that way the part that connects to the downpipe, basically instead of being a 2.5-inch reducer, it is cut flat, and we put a resonator right there with a 3-inch outlet that connects to the rest of the 3-inch piping on the downpipe. So it is basically a full 4.5-inch down to a 3-inch exhaust. That allows for a very free-flowing exhaust setup that is able to push a ton of air through the system. And combined with a great intake setup, that is how we are able to move a ton of air through this turbo. Now, obviously, if you're trying to make power on a car, you need a couple of things. You need fuel, air, spark, and timing. We have added more air. We have upgraded spark plugs to 2-step colder, which basically means that they burn colder, I guess. And we're controlling everything with the tune that we have from EQT. But if we did all of these mods, we would be limited at fueling. Now, my original plan was to try and do multi-port injection, but what we ended up doing was actually a little bit different. Now, multi-port injection is basically adding an extra injector per cylinder to allow for a lot more fuel flow. The thing is though, that is pretty expensive, and so in my case, I just did a simple high pressure fuel pump upgrade. And we have the Autotech one because it's been proven to be pretty reliable, and they also have a lifetime warranty. In addition to that, in the back of the car where the fuel tank sits, we also have a EQT Standard low pressure fuel pump. Now, that is basically the equivalent to a RS3 fuel pump, and that allows more fuel to be sucked out of the fuel tank and brought to the high pressure fuel system on the car. The only real drawback is that I am actually fuel limited still, so there could be more power if I had multi-port injection instead of a high pressure fuel pump upgrade. And that would allow for a little bit more power even on 93 octane. In addition to that, the multi-port injection would also allow us to be able to run ethanol on the car, which I do plan on probably doing in the future, but I'm not 100% sure yet. We do still have the Cobb flex fuel sensor, but it's sitting on my shelf right over there and has not been installed yet. Also, I just had to close the garage because the neighbors started blowing their leaves, so bear with me. Now, that pretty much covers all of the main performance mods, but we do have a couple more things to touch on. The first thing is going to be this EQT Coil Grounding Kit. Now, from factory, each of these coil packs have a little wire that comes out and grounds right here. But over time, the more you use these and the more you replace the spark plugs, those grounds will eventually wear out and start to strip. So this coil grounding kit basically reroutes the grounds from each of these connectors to, instead of grounding right here, they all ground on this headlight ground right here. It also makes changing out the spark plugs and coil packs a lot quicker, and it's just a nice little quality of life improvement. We also do have the Mk8 PCV Retrofit kit right here, and this is why you'll see on the air intake there's this extra little bung that's capped off, because we don't have a Venturi hose that runs to a boost tap on the discharge pipe side. But if we had that, we could run the Venturi hose down here, but this is fine for the retrofit kit, and this basically just helps with reducing blow by on the car. And the last real supporting mod, I guess, in the engine bay area is that we have a Koyorad Radiator, because when I was installing my intercooler, my dumbass poked a screwdriver right through the radiator. So it was time to upgrade the radiator. I have no complaints with the Koyorad. I think it's pretty solid. It feels nice. It was a way better build quality than the factory one, and it's kept my coolant temps consistently pretty low. Good job, Koyo. That is pretty much all of my mods that pertain to fueling, the engine bay, and stuff like that that actually create power. Let's kind of talk about some of the other stuff. Guess the next thing to talk about would be the brakes that I have on this car. You might have noticed it earlier, but these are actually Porsche Macan calipers. Now, this is an upgrade that I really wanted to do. It's not the most critical, but it is really nice. Now, I really like this caliper setup because of a few different reasons. It's easy to swap pads, they're super light, they look friggin' sick, and it's a straight bolt-on kit. Well, 99% bolt-on. In order to run these up front, we did actually upgrade our rotors from 340mm to 345mm, because otherwise, if you use 340, there would be a slight bit of pad overhang, which if we're gonna upgrade them, might as well go all the way. And we also had to get some Technofit stainless brake lines because the fitting that connects into the caliper is different than the stock ones. Luckily, there's plenty of kits out there for this exact setup, so it's very easy to get parts for it. But other than those couple of parts that you need, and obviously different pads, the kit literally bolts right up, uses your existing hardware, and honestly, it looks really nice. Now, we didn't completely neglect the rear, but it's definitely not as crazy back here. We did paint the calipers black, just so that way it's black up front and black in the rear, but we did also do some EBC rotors that are the stock size back here, and we also added some ECS stainless brake lines. We also did several OBD11 adjustments for this brake setup, like turning off the hydraulic brake booster, turning off the brake assist, and just other things to really help make the pedal feel a lot better. I really like this brake setup because of all the reasons I mentioned earlier, and also honestly, it just performs really well, and I never have to worry about braking too hard or even locking them up in 99% of cases. Is it worth it? Yes, but in most cases, do you need it? Probably not. Now, moving on to suspension, this is where things are interesting. I do have a pretty straightforward suspension setup. The car is currently on H&R Springs. And I also have an APR Rear Swaybar and an ECS Tuning Dogbone Insert. I did springs because the car does have adaptive suspension, and honestly, at the time, I didn't want to purchase DCC cancelers, and springs were also a lot cheaper than a good set of coilovers. They ride okay, but it's definitely not as good now as it was back then, just because of how much better everything else is on the car. You can really kind of see the springs start to kind of lack. But the rear sway bar does help a lot with stiffening up the chassis and really reducing body roll and turns, and allows you to go through corners a lot faster. Lastly, the Dogbone insert is important because basically it reduces wheel hop, and that means that you can launch the car better without just having like, you know what I mean? It's really nice for just being a small, cheap mod that aids a lot in getting more traction on digs and stuff like that. Now here's the thing, right? Pretty soon we are going to be installing a set of coilovers, and haven't got around to it quite yet, so y'all will have to stay tuned for that video in the near future. Really nothing too crazy, just a few nice little things, and obviously we still have a few other things that we need to do suspension wise, really to be able to put this power down, because it being a front wheel drive car making as much power as it does, it doesn't get traction very well. I think now is a good time to go over all of the cosmetic things that we have done to the car. These are Rotiform DTM wheels that are 18 by 8.5 plus 35 with a 245/40/18 Firestone Firehawk Indy500 tire. Try saying that 5 times fast, it is not possible. I've had this set up on the car for a bit over a year now, and it has been really good, but these tires are getting pretty low, so traction is starting to basically disappear and never come back. But we do have a new set of tires back there and some wheels that we're redoing, so y'all will also have to stay tuned for that one. Now, obviously the GLI, GTI, and cars like that are known for red badging. Now, personally, I'm not a huge fan of red. It's not my color. Thankfully, Swan Vinyl makes these awesome inlays for the badges. That way you can cover everything that you want to cover up and change the colors however you want. In my case, pretty much all of my badges are silver and black. So we have the silver and black side badges. We have the black headlight eyelids. We covered the chrome stripes in silver and the red stripe in black. And we also have the front GLI badge in a nice silver, as well as the rear badge. We also have these silver mirror caps that I got on AliExpress, and these sequential turn signals that I got off of Amazon. Now, one of the things that we have done recently, and huge shout out to CJM for honestly helping out with a lot of this stuff, is the body kit on the car. This is the CJM front splitter that we got installed a couple of weeks ago. It is a nice sturdy one-piece splitter that really just kind of follows the body lines of the car and gives it a little bit more presence on the road. To complement that splitter, we also have the CJM Side Skirts right here, and lastly we have the drag cutters, rear diffuser, and side spats, which also looks pretty nice and just adds a little bit more aggressiveness to the rear. We also have this spoiler from eBay. Definitely not the nicest thing in the world, but it does work and get the job done. Now on the interior of the car, we only have two mods. One being these DSG paddles paddle shifters, and two, this drift stone scent that smells really, really good. I've had this one for almost a year now, and honestly, dude, this works. It is great. Now that is pretty much going to cover every single mod that I have done to my GLI. If I forgot anything, I will throw it up right here, and you can Google it or something. I don't know, we'll see. But we do have quite a few things still planned for the car, including those coilovers that are right there, the new wheels and tires that I'm working on over here, and a couple other small goodies. So make sure that y'all stay tuned, and if you enjoyed the video, if you liked it, and if you guys want to see more of my videos, go press that subscribe button. It's that easy. It's that easy. Anyways, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Adios.